The bass in the Alpha House mansion didn't just play, it possessed. It rattled the floorboards, shook the crystal chandeliers, and vibrated the surface of the drinks tray Leo balanced on one aching hand. Strobe lights sliced through the humid air, turning the writhing crowd into a stop-motion nightmare of sweat, designer clothes, and unearned arrogance. Leo was 19, broke, and invisible. To the trust fund kids grinding on the dance floor, he wasn't a human being with a name or a history. He was furniture. He was just the waiter in the cheap black vest, a ghost moving through their world of excess, tasked with cleaning up their messes. But ghosts see everything. From the edge of the room, obscured by the shadow of a marble pillar, Leo watched. He saw Chad, the football captain with a jawline bought by old money and a soul rotted by entitlement, lean over the VIP table. He watched Chad's hand hover over a red plastic cup destined for Raven, the new girl who had spent the entire night looking like a caged tiger. Leo saw the glint of something white. A powder, tapped quickly from a hidden vial. It dissolved instantly into the punch. Chad smirked, a predator's grin, and turned to high-five his friends. He thought no one was watching. He thought the waiter was just part of the scenery. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He had a choice. He could turn a blind eye, keep his head down, and keep the job that paid for his mother's insulin. Or he could use the one skill he had mastered growing up on the streets where survival depended on how fast your hands could move. Leo stepped out of the shadows. The Alpha Omega fraternity house smelled of stale beer, expensive cologne, and desperation. It was a smell Leo knew well, the scent of people trying too hard to prove they owned the world. Leo adjusted his bow tie, the fabric scratching his neck. His feet were screaming in his worn-out dress shoes, but his face remained a mask of polite indifference. He wove through the crowd, collecting empty glasses, his eyes scanning the floor for hazards. "Watch it, Townie," a voice sneered. Leo didn't flinch as a shoulder checked him hard. It was one of the pledges, a kid wearing a polo shirt that cost more than Leo's rent. Leo just nodded, muttered a programmed, "Apologies, sir," and kept moving. That was the rule. Don't engage, don't exist, be the wallpaper. He made his way to the service station near the main bar, setting down his tray. From this vantage point, he had a clear view of the VIP section, a raised platform cordoned off by velvet ropes, reserved for the fraternity elite. That was where Chad held court. Chad was the president of Alpha Omega, a golden boy with a heavy signet ring and a father in the Senate. He was currently holding a bottle of vodka like a scepter, laughing loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Sitting across from him was Raven. She didn't fit in. While the other sorority girls wore pastel dresses and plastered-on smiles, Raven wore a black leather jacket over a simple tank top, her dark hair loose and messy. She looked bored, her eyes darting toward the exit every few seconds. She was holding a red Solo cup, but she hadn't taken a sip in 20 minutes. "Come on, babe," Chad's voice carried over the thumping bass. "You're killing the vibe. Drink up." "I'm good, Chad," Raven said, her voice low and scratchy. "I told you, I'm just here because my roommate dragged me." "You're here because you want to be part of the elite," Chad said, leaning in too close. "Don't play hard to get. It's boring." Leo wiped down the counter, his jaw tightening. He knew guys like Chad. He saw them every weekend. They were used to taking what they wanted, and they didn't like being told no. Leo checked his watch. 11:45 p.m. 2 more hours until his shift ended. 2 more hours of invisibility. He just needed to survive the night, collect his tips, and go home to the small, drafty apartment he shared with his mother. He looked back at the VIP table. Chad was whispering something to his vice president, a bulky guy named Kyle. They both looked at Raven, then back at each other. Chad reached into his pocket. Leo stopped wiping the counter. The air in the room seemed to grow colder, despite the sweating bodies. Leo's eyes narrowed. He had grown up learning magic from an old street performer named Silas. Silas had taught him that the trick wasn't about what the hand did. It was about where the eye looked. Misdirection. Chad was terrible at misdirection. He was arrogant, and arrogance made you sloppy. "Hey, Raven, look at that over there." Chad pointed toward the DJ booth, feigning excitement. Raven turned her head, distracted for a split second. That was all it took. Chad's hand moved over Raven's cup. He didn't even try to hide it well. He dropped a crushed white pill into the red liquid. The fizz was drowned out by the music. Chad pulled his hand back and picked up his own cup, tapping it against hers. "To new friends?" he said, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. Raven turned back, oblivious. She reached for her cup. Leo froze. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through his veins. If Raven drank that, she was done. He knew what kind of stuff circulated in these parties. Roofies, tranquilizers, ketamine, whatever it was meant to incapacitate. Leo looked around. The bouncers were frat brothers. The bartender was Chad's cousin. If Leo shouted, "He drugged her," they would throw him out for slander. They would say the poor towny waiter was trying to start trouble. Chad would deny it, Raven would be confused, and Leo would lose his job. And 10 minutes later, Raven would still drink it. He had no allies. He had no authority. He looked at his hands. Long fingers, calloused from work but steady. He remembered the coin rolls, the card passes, the hours spent in front of a cracked mirror making objects disappear. The hand is faster than the eye. He grabbed a fresh tray. He piled it with napkins and a few empty glass bottles to make it rattle. He didn't think about the consequences. He didn't think about the rent money. He just thought about the look in Chad's eyes, the look of a man who thought he was a god. Leo took a breath, stepped over the velvet rope, and walked into the lion's den. Leo moved with purpose, heading straight for the table between Chad and Raven. He timed his steps to the heavy beat of the music. As he reached the table, he let his foot catch on the edge of the rug. It was a calculated stumble, practiced 1,000 times for comedy routines, but here it looked painfully real. "Whoa!" Leo yelped. He lunged forward. The tray in his left hand slammed onto the table with a deafening crash. Glass bottles clattered, napkins flew into the air like white doves, and chaos erupted in a 3-foot radius. "You idiot!" Chad roared, jumping back to avoid the imaginary splash. Raven flinched, pulling her hands back. For 1 second, everyone was looking at the mess. Everyone was looking at the napkins fluttering down. Everyone was looking at the clumsy waiter struggling to regain his balance. No one was looking at the cups. In that singular moment of chaos, Leo's right hand moved. It was a blur, a phantom motion. He reached out, his fingers curling around the rim of Raven's cup and Chad's cup simultaneously. The switch. It happened in less than a blink. His wrist flicked. The cups crossed paths, swapping positions with perfect geometric precision. He set them down exactly where the other had been. By the time the first napkin hit the floor, the cups were swapped. "I am so sorry," Leo stammered, his voice trembling with feigned panic. He began frantically wiping the dry table with the napkins. "I tripped. I'm so sorry, sir." Chad's face was purple with rage. He shoved Leo hard, sending him stumbling back. "You clumsy peasant," Chad screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. "Do you know how much this shirt costs? You ruined the vibe." "I'm sorry, I'll clean it up." "Get out of here," Chad barked. "Get out of my face before I have you fired and blacklisted from every job in this city." To reassert his dominance, to show Raven and his brothers that he was the alpha who couldn't be rattled by a clumsy servant, Chad scoffed. He grabbed the cup sitting in front of him, the cup that had been in front of Raven 3 seconds ago. "Useless trash," Chad muttered. He locked eyes with Leo, a challenge in his gaze. And then Chad lifted the cup to his lips and drained half of it in one massive gulp. Leo felt a strange, cold calm wash over him. He bowed his head submissively. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." He backed away, clutching his empty tray. His heart was beating so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Chad wiped his mouth, satisfied. He turned to Raven, smiling. "Ignore him. Just the help. Now, where were we?" Raven looked at her cup, then at the spilled napkins. She didn't drink. She just watched Leo retreat into the shadows. Leo retreated to the kitchen but didn't leave. He stood by the swinging doors, watching through the small porthole window. He had to wait. He had to be sure. 10 minutes passed. The music shifted to a faster tempo. Chad was aggressive now. He was pulling Raven toward the dance floor, his grip on her wrist too tight. "Let go, Chad," Raven said, her voice audible even over the music as she yanked her arm back. "Stop being a prude," Chad laughed, but the laugh sounded wet, slurred. Leo watched closely. The drugs were hitting. Chad blinked rapidly. He shook his head like a dog trying to get water out of its ears. He took a step toward Raven and stumbled. "Whoa," Chad mumbled. "Who turned out the lights?" "Chad?" Kyle, his VP, stepped up. "You good, bro?" "I feel weird," Chad said. His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the DJ booth to hold himself up, but his hand slipped. "Why is the room melting?" Chad screamed, panic suddenly seizing him. The drugs were potent. Too potent. Chad wasn't just getting sleepy. He was getting obliterated. He gagged. A second later, he projected vomit all over his Italian leather loafers. The music cut out. A collective gasp rippled through the party. Chad collapsed onto the floor, his limbs twitching, his eyes rolling back into his head. He was drooling, murmuring nonsense about spiders and shadows. "He's ODing!" someone shrieked. Kyle knelt beside Chad. "Chad, what did you take?" Chad couldn't answer. He was clawing at his throat. Raven stood over him, frozen. She looked at her own cup, still full on the table. Then she looked at Chad. She looked at the puddle of vomit. Then her eyes lifted. Across the room, through the chaos, she locked eyes with the waiter standing by the kitchen door. Leo didn't smile. He just nodded, once. Raven's eyes widened. He knew. It was him! The scream broke the connection. Kyle was pointing a shaking finger at the kitchen door, at Leo. "I saw the waiter messing with the drinks," Kyle yelled, desperate to shift the blame from the fraternity. "He spiked the drinks! That townie poisoned Chad!" The mob turned. 100 angry, drunk, entitled eyes landed on Leo. Leo stepped back, but the kitchen door behind him burst open. 2 massive football players blocked his exit. "Where you going, townie?" one of them growled. Logic left the building. Mob mentality took the wheel. They didn't care about evidence. They saw their golden boy on the floor, and they saw an outsider, a poor nobody, who made an easy target. "Grab him!" Kyle shouted. Leo tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Hands grabbed his vest. A fist connected with his stomach, knocking the wind out of him. "I didn't do it," Leo gasped, doubling over. "He did it to himself." "Liar." Someone struck him across the face. They dragged him out of the kitchen, through the back exit, and onto the manicured lawn of the backyard garden. The cold night air hit Leo's face, stinging the fresh cut on his cheek. They threw him onto the grass. He scrambled to get up, but a boot kicked him in the ribs. He heard a crack, followed by a burst of white-hot pain. "Stay down." 3 of them circled him, Kyle and 2 linemen. They were fueled by adrenaline and the need to protect their reputation. If Chad did this to himself, the frat was liable. If the waiter did it, the waiter was a monster. "Check the cups!" Leo screamed, curling into a ball to protect his head. "Test his blood! It's his drugs!" "Shut him up," Kyle ordered. Another kick landed on his thigh. Leo gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. He knew how this worked. They would beat him until the cops arrived. Then they would tell a story about how they subdued a dangerous criminal. He would go to jail. His life was over. Inside the house, Raven was moving against the tide of people fleeing the scene. She grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. She knew what happened. She had seen the clumsy spill, the switch. He took the bullet for me. She looked out the window. She saw the boys kicking the figure on the ground. She didn't dial 911. The police in this town were in the pocket of the university, and the university was in the pocket of Chad's father. She dialed a number she had saved under Do Not Call. It rang once. Raven? A deep, gravelly voice answered. Daddy, Raven said, her voice cracking. I'm at the Alpha House. There's a boy. He saved me from being hurt, and now they're killing him. There was a silence on the other end, a terrifying, heavy silence. Who was hurting him? The frat boys? Chad's friends. Stay inside, princess, the voice said. The line went dead. The beating had slowed, but only because the frat boys were getting tired. Leo was lying on his side, wheezing. His left eye was swollen shut. His ribs felt like broken glass. Kyle loomed over him, panting. You're going to jail for a long time, nobody. Leo spat blood onto the grass. He looked up at Kyle with his one good eye. He deserved it. Kyle raised his boot for a final stomp to the face. It started as a vibration in the ground. The grass blades shivered. Kyle paused, his foot hovering in the air. Is that thunder? The sound grew. It wasn't the sharp crack of thunder. It was a low, rhythmic growl, a mechanical roar that deepened until it rattled the windows of the mansion. Tom, end of scratching literal, end of scratches. It was getting closer. Fast. What is that? One of the linemen asked, backing away from Leo. The sound enveloped them. It was the sound of raw horsepower, of unmuffled engines screaming for blood. Then, the wooden fence at the back of the garden exploded. It didn't just break. It shattered. Splinters of wood flew like shrapnel as a massive black shape tore through the barrier. A motorcycle, a Harley-Davidson Road King, customized in matte black and chrome. It hit the rose bushes, crushing them under massive tires. Behind it, 4 more bikes roared through the breach, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights from a prison tower. They circled the frat boys, the engines revving aggressively, trapping them in a ring of noise and exhaust fumes. The frat boys covered their ears, terrified. This wasn't campus security. This was a war party. The lead biker killed his engine. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. He kicked down his stand and dismounted. He was a giant of a man, standing 6'6". He wore a leather cut with a patch on the back, a Spartan helmet crossed with 2 pistons. Iron Spartans, MC. Underneath, the rocker read, President. This was Rocco, the Hammer. He didn't run. He walked slowly, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. He held a 2-foot steel tire iron in his right hand. His face was a map of scars, illuminated by the red taillights of the bikes. He stopped 10 feet from Kyle. He didn't even look at the frat boys. He looked down at the broken boy on the grass. Raven, Rocco said, his voice a low rumble. Raven ran out from the back door. She bypassed the bikers and fell to her knees beside Leo. She touched his shoulder gently. He's alive, but they hurt him bad. Rocco turned his head slowly toward Kyle. Kyle, who had been so brave when kicking a defenseless waiter, was now trembling. He looked at the tire iron. He looked at the 4 other bikers who had dismounted, arms crossed, waiting for a command. Who touched him? Rocco asked. It wasn't a shout. It was a question asked by a man who already knew the answer. Look, Kyle stammered, holding his hands up. You don't understand. That guy, he poisoned our president. We were just... Raven, Rocco said, cutting him off. What happened? Raven stood up, her eyes blazing. Chad tried to drug me. He put something in my cup. Leo saw it. He switched the cups. Chad drugged himself. She pointed at Kyle. And when Chad passed out, they blamed Leo so they wouldn't have to admit their precious captain is a predator. Rocco stared at Kyle. The weight of his gaze was physical. Is that true? Rocco asked. No. She's lying. Rocco took one step forward. Just one. Kyle flinched so hard he almost fell over. If we go inside, Rocco said, and we take a blood sample from your boy on the floor, what are we going to find? Kyle's mouth opened and closed. He looked at the house, where sirens were finally wailing in the distance. He realized the game was over. If the police tested Chad and they found roofies in his system, Chad was done. He did it to himself, Kyle whispered, his voice breaking. Rocco nodded. Right. He turned to his men. Get the boy. Two bikers moved forward, gentle despite their appearance. They lifted Leo up. Leo groaned, his head lolling back. You're okay, kid, one of the bikers rumbled. We got you. Rocco walked up to Kyle. He loomed over him, blocking out the moonlight. He tapped the tire iron against Kyle's chest. Tap! Tap! Listen to me, Rocco said. The police are coming. You're going to tell them exactly what happened. Chad drugged himself. This boy, he gestured to Leo, is a hero. If I hear a single word different, if I hear this boy gets fired, if I hear he even stubs his toe. Rocco leaned in, his face inches from Kyle's. I will come back. And I won't bring the bikes next time. I'll just bring this. He lifted the tire iron. Kyle nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Yes, sir. Rocco turned to Raven. Get on the bike. I'm riding with Leo, she said stubbornly, climbing into the SUV that had just pulled up behind the bikes, the support vehicle. Rocco smirked, a rare, terrifying expression. Let's ride. The hospital room was quiet. It was a private suite, paid for in cash. Leo woke up to the smell of antiseptic and leather. He blinked his good eye open. Sitting in the chair next to the bed was the giant, Rocco. He was reading a motorcycle magazine, looking completely out of place in the sterile room. You're awake, Rocco said, putting the magazine down. Am I arrested? Leo croaked. His throat was dry. No, you're a witness, Rocco said. The police report says Chad accidentally ingested a controlled substance he brought to the party. He's been expelled. His daddy is trying to hush it up, but the internet already knows. His life is over. Leo tried to sit up, but his ribs protested. Raven? She's outside. She hasn't left for 12 hours. She's stubborn. Gets it from her mother. Rocco stood up. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the bed. What's this? Compensation, Rocco said, for the tips you missed. Leo opened the envelope. It was cash. A lot of cash. But underneath the stack of bills was a letter. It was on the university letterhead. Full academic scholarship, grant approved. Leo looked up, confused. How? The dean owes me a favor, Rocco said vaguely. Don't ask. Rocco walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. He looked back at Leo, his eyes serious. You have quick hands, kid, and you got guts. Most people would have looked away. I couldn't, Leo said. I know, Rocco nodded. The Iron Spartans don't forget debts. You ever have trouble again, you show them this. Rocco tossed a heavy coin onto the bedside table. It was silver, stamped with the Spartan helmet. You're with us now. 1 month later. The autumn wind blew leaves across the campus quad. Leo walked toward the library, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His ribs were healed, though a faint yellow bruise remained on his jaw. He saw a group of Alpha Omega brothers sitting on a wall. They saw him coming. One of them started to stand up, a sneer forming on his face. He opened his mouth to say something nasty. Then he stopped. Leaning against a massive oak tree 20 yards behind Leo was a biker. He was wearing the Iron Spartan's cut, arms crossed, watching. The biker didn't move. He just stared at the frat boy. Then, slowly, he shook his head. No. The frat boy turned pale. He sat back down, looking at his feet. The group fell silent, letting Leo pass. Leo didn't look back. He just fingered the silver coin in his pocket, felt its weight, and smiled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. He was untouchable.